Myst, Might, Mayhem. By Hanjung Liuya. Chapter 77. Silent Strides. Part 1. Swoosh. A faint haze rose along with sweat from the muscles of Mok Yuchion's bare upper body. As energy circulated through his exhausted muscles and internal organs from the long overdue energy circulation and breath refinement, the fatigue gradually subsided. Now that the restriction was lifted, he realized even more the preciousness of internal energy. I think I'll live. The difference between circulating energy and not was stark. Simply sleeping could alleviate the tiredness, but by circulating energy, the accumulated fatigue throughout the body was also released. Sting. Sting. As he circulated energy, his fingers started to ache. After doing a few small revolutions, he opened his eyes and saw his messed up hands. Broken nails and bruises covered his fingers, back of the hands, and palms, with not a single spot unscathed. Seeing this, Mok Yuchion had a strange thought. Although he wasn't very old, had he ever worked this hard to fiercely survive since he was born? No. It was the first time. It was his first real battle and his first time killing someone. Not long ago, all he did was train alone in the martial arts hall, sweating. But now, it felt like he had fallen into an abyss in an instant. Clench. Mok Yuchion clenched his hands full of wounds. No matter what, he would somehow survive this place. The only one he could trust was himself. Mok Jiang'an. He decided not to have any more false hopes about that guy. He didn't know what made that guy change so much, but that guy didn't care about him, and he had no reason to either. The fact that they were half-brothers was meaningless. Survival of the fittest. This was such a place. He still couldn't understand why he, who had entered as a hostage, had to struggle and risk his life like this against them, but to survive, he had to become stronger. The world is vast. Once the energy point was unblocked, he believed there would be no one among the boys who could defeat him. However, he couldn't hide his inner surprise at the energy stimulating his senses here and there. He thought that among his peers, besides himself, only the later generation disciples from major sects would have reached the peak realm. But that was a misconception. Tap. Mok Yuchion got up from his seat. Then, glancing at Ma Sang who was circulating energy on the bed, he quietly assumed the basic stance of the Yun Mok sword matter. The human psyche was truly peculiar. Even in this extreme situation where one could die at any moment, a strong competitive spirit arose instead. Seeing this, he thought that he might be a martial artist to the bone. I need to become stronger. To do that, training was the only answer. Anyway, even if he gathered internal energy through energy circulation and breath refinement for a day or two, it wouldn't have a significant impact. It was enough to just recover his body. The rest of the time, it was important to gain insight through training. Pack. Mok Yuchion slowly unfolded the basic stances of the Yun Mok sword matter. This slow-paced martial arts practice, less than half the original speed, was one of the training methods called flying consecutive kick technique, aimed at improving the precision of the stances. It was to train as much as possible without disrupting Ma Sang's energy circulation, as they were sharing the same room. Papak. Even with slow movements, sound spread from where the fists landed. Mok Yuchion had trained in the flying consecutive kick technique method for a long time, so he could fully exert strength even when slowly unfolding the stances. It was at that moment when he was concentrating on training. I thought it might be, but it really was the Yun Mok sword matter. Startled by this voice, Mok Yuchion stopped and turned his head. The owner of the voice was Ma Sang, the boy with whom he had shared life and death from the beginning to the end of the second gateway. Although they clashed briefly at the end, they understood each other's feelings, so they decided not to blame each other and share a room. Although he was from the evil faction, he was a guy with loyalty and seemed decent, so he was a friend Mok Yuchion felt somewhat close to. However, how do you know that? How I know isn't important. Why is someone from the righteous faction in Corpse Blood Valley? That's. Mok Yuchion was momentarily at a loss for words. No matter the reason, him being here was no different from a disgrace as a member of the righteous faction. That's why he couldn't speak. To him, Ma Sang said, "Did the Yun Mok Sword Manor betray the righteous faction? What are you talking about?" In an instant, Mok Yucheon raised his voice as if he was upset. He might not know other things, but he had not yet lost his pride as a member of the righteous faction. It was because the manor master, his father, had also chosen to seal the sect not to surrender but to save everyone. The Yun Mok Sword Manor is forever a part of the righteous faction. At Mok Yucheon's words, Ma Sang scoffed and said as if it was ridiculous, "Don't say such nonsense. A guy who has come all the way to Corpse Blood Valley says he hasn't betrayed the righteous faction? Aren't you here to become a direct disciple of the Heaven and Earth Society's executives in the end?" "What?" At Ma Sang's words, Mok Yucheon's eyes trembled. "What is this about? Becoming a direct disciple of the Heaven and Earth Society's executives?" He couldn't understand. At Mok Yucheon's reaction of incomprehension, Ma Sang's eyes narrowed. "What? Don't tell me you didn't know?" At that question, Mok Yucheon had a perplexed expression for a while before opening his mouth. "I don't know. I was just dragged here without any notice and didn't know anything." "Really? You didn't know anything?" "Yeah." At these words, Ma Sang spoke with a suspicious look. "That's absurd. To enter Corpse Blood Valley without knowing anything. I told you it's true. Would you believe it if you were me? What the hell is this place? Why is everyone risking their lives and causing this chaos?" He couldn't understand it from the beginning. Those warriors in red belts who didn't care even as so many of them died, and the boys who risked their lives to carry out the gateways they ordered. Not a single thing was within the realm of understanding. Why are we risking our lives, you ask? Corpse Blood Valley is the shortest path to becoming a direct disciple of the Heaven and Earth Society's executives. Why do you think everyone is risking their lives? If you overcome that risk, you get a chance to be chosen by the 8 executives of the Heaven and Earth Society and become their direct disciple. Even if you don't become one, the more gateways you pass, the more benefits you get to become a team leader or division leader. Do you think opportunities like this come easily? The Heaven and Earth Society. A chance to become a direct disciple of the 8 executives? Mok Yucheon's eyes trembled severely. Now he seemed to understand why they were risking their lives to such an extent to carry out the gateways. Becoming a disciple of the 8 executives, known as the top masters of the Heaven and Earth Society that dominated the martial arts world, was an opportunity to rise to a status that could control the martial arts world in the future. For them, it was worth risking their lives. But he was different. Damn it. Mok Yucheon bit his lip tightly. Then, all this time, his struggling to survive meant he had been striving to become a direct disciple of the Heaven and Earth Society, which could be called the archenemy of the righteous faction. What the hell am I doing? If that really happened. The Yun Mok Sword Manor would not be sending hostages but sending their children to the Heaven and Earth Society's Talent Nurturing Center. Doing something to survive was poisonous to the Yun Mok Sword Manor. Mok Yucheon was genuinely confused. What should he do? Was it a trap that the Heaven and Earth Society had sent him here? It was at that moment when he was dumbfounded. It seems you really didn't come here of your own will. Ma Sang's tone suddenly became quite serious, unlike before. At this, Mok Yucheon couldn't hide his bewilderment. How did you come here? At that question, Mok Yucheon hesitated. He had learned that his entry into Corpse Blood Valley was no different from a trap, and he thought it was dangerous to say anything to people under the Heaven and Earth Society, who were practically enemies. While he was doing that, Ma Sang poked at the wound again. It is betrayal, isn't it? At those words, Mok Yucheon's face flushed with anger. If it weren't for this situation, he would have wanted to slap Ma Sang's face, but he barely held back. Then, he eventually revealed the truth. It's not betrayal. I was just taken as a hostage. Hostage? Yeah. Nonsense. Why would they send a hostage to Corpse Blood Valley? I don't know either. I thought they would just keep me nicely. Like you said, I didn't know Corpse Blood Valley was a place like this. You didn't know? If I knew, I wouldn't have struggled like this. I would have rather tried to escape somehow. Escape? Can you say that to me? I don't know. Right now, I don't even know what I should do. The more I put an effort to survive here, the more likely it is that the Yun Moksword Manor will be branded as having betrayed the righteous faction. If that's the case, for the honor and family as a member of the righteous faction, committing suicide might be the right thing to do. Escaping from here was virtually impossible anyway. He clearly realized that as soon as the energy point was unblocked. Monster. The man wearing the demon mask was a master beyond imagination. He couldn't do anything at his level. Suicide. If this was the only answer, it was frightening. He had only lived for 16 years, and it was a scary thing to end his life for the sake of his family. As he became aware of death, Ma Yuqian involuntarily shivered. Ma Sang, who had been staring intently at him like that, suddenly got up from the bed, closed the window, checked outside the door, then closed the door and locked it. Then, he approached Ma Yuqian and spoke in a whisper with a serious face. You really didn't betray, did you? I told you I didn't. Shoo, keep your voice down. At his words, Ma Yuqian furrowed his brows. Why was he suddenly doing this? While he was puzzled, Ma Sang spoke again in a whisper. I'm sorry for not believing you from the beginning. Even though the Yun Moksword Manor has been a renowned righteous faction for a long time, I couldn't help but consider the possibility. What are you talking about now? Listen quietly. I'm a spy sent by the Righteous Alliance. At his words, Ma Yuqian's eyes widened. A spy sent by the Righteous Alliance? While he was amazed, Ma Sang continued, have you heard of Silent Strides? Ah, Silent Strides? He had heard of it before. The Righteous Alliance boasted 4 main organizations. One of them was the Silent Strides. It was a secret organization known to exist as the dagger of the Righteous Alliance in the shadows and darkness, not invisible places. As a secret organization, it was literally an organization that should not be known. However, due to a certain incident, the existence of this Silent Strides was revealed. Although the name of the organization became known, the Righteous Alliance strongly denied the existence of this organization, so opinions were divided among people about its existence. But Ma Sang was saying he was from that Silent Strides? The Silent Strides might not be a real organization. It's real. The Righteous Alliance, which pursues righteousness, denied it only because they couldn't acknowledge the existence of an organization in charge of intelligence and assassinations. Huh. So the Silent Strides really existed. It was truly surprising. Really? To think the Silent Strides existed. But is it okay to reveal your identity like this? Ma Yuqian spoke to him in a respectful manner. Then, Ma Sang shook his head and replied. Just speak normally. Still. It will only raise suspicion. I understand. But is it okay to reveal your identity to me? Actually, in most cases, we're not allowed to reveal our identities even to people from the same righteous faction. But why? The first reason is to identify allies and enemies. Identify? Since the gateways of Corpse Blood Valley often require us to kill each other and everyone around us is an enemy, we need to make you aware that we are allies. Ah. Is that why he revealed his identity? But revealing it just for that seemed a bit too casual for a secret organization. Come to think of it, didn't he say we just now? Does that mean there are more people from Silent Strides besides Ma Sang? While Ma Yuqian was puzzled, Ma Sang said. The second reason is that, unlike our objective, too many of our infiltrated personnel have died. Infiltrated personnel? As expected, it seemed there were more people from Silent Strides besides Ma Sang. Then there are more besides you? That's right. Originally, about 50 people had infiltrated. 50 people? Ma Yuqian's eyes widened. They infiltrated with that many people without getting caught by the Heaven and Earth Society? While he was thinking that, Mossang said. But 70% of them were filtered out by the Heaven and Earth Society's information network and were blocked or killed in advance. The number of people who successfully entered Corpse Blood Valley is 15. As a result, it meant that among the approximately 800 challengers of Corpse Blood Valley, 15 were spies from the Righteous Alliance's Silent Strides. Mok Yucheon, who didn't know the nature of an intelligence organization, couldn't judge whether this was a large or small number. However, judging from Mossang's tone, it sounded like even having this many people enter was quite successful. But a problem arose. What problem? In the first gateway, all 15 passed, but in the second gateway, 11 died. If 11 died, that meant only 4 survived. Considering there were still gateways remaining, the probability of failure had become extremely high. He seemed to know why Mossang revealed his identity. Could it be? That's right. It's to ask for your help, Mok Yucheon. At his words, Mok Yucheon shut his mouth. It was because he was at a loss for how to react. Who would have imagined a situation where a member of the Righteous Alliance's shadow organization, Silent Strides, would reveal their identity and ask him for help? I think it's hard for you to accept. But there was no other way. Based on the experience and information from past failed infiltrations, we only sent personnel capable of fighting against others with external techniques even without internal energy, but even we didn't know this situation would happen. He seemed to know. That monster, the wolf-shaped creature that made pig-like cries. Chapter 78. Silent Strides. Part 2. Silent Strides. It was a secret organization created by the Righteous Alliance, which could be called the main axis of righteousness. Only a very small number of people within the Righteous Alliance knew the exact time of its establishment, and not many knew exactly what they did. Those who knew about Silent Strides called them the Shadow of the Righteous Alliance. They were in charge of tasks that should not be revealed in the unseen darkness, so they could never rise to the light. Within Silent Strides, there was an even more special group. The fourth, Zhang, group, which existed apart from the regular groups, the first, Gap, group, internal audit, the second, Yule, group, intelligence, and the third, Byong, group, assassination. Monsters. Even among the agents of Silent Strides, that's what they were called. This included a measure of the strength of the fourth group agents, but there was another reason as well. It was because they were different from ordinary humans. Nung Wyong, the vice commander of the 13th squad of the 4th group. She was also one of the members and one of the 3 4th group agents dispatched for this mission. It's a request from the 2nd group. Show the skills of the 4th group agents. Corpse Blood Valley was a mission that the 2nd group had failed several times. That's why the 4th group sent agents this time to achieve results in the intelligence field as well. Nung Wyong snapped her fingers and gestured seductively to Mok Jiangun. Let's have a conversation with our bodies. Mok Jiangun. Thanks to that guy, 7 of the dispatched agents lost their lives. Because of this, an order was given. Sever his tendons and destroy his Danjian. It wasn't a difficult task. The task she had been specializing in was assassinating important figures. Especially in the case of men, it was even easier. With a little seduction, they would fall for it and embrace her, so she could enjoy it moderately, and all that was left was to take their lives as a finish. He's quite handsome. This was the first time she had seen him up close. But seeing his face, he was extremely handsome beyond being good-looking. Although he was smiling, there was a sense of decadence, and in many ways, it was a face that women would like. What a pity. It was a waste to enjoy it once and then make him a cripple. However, there was no choice for the sake of the mission. Not only did agents die because of this guy, but he was also the most disruptive factor for future missions. Thud. At that moment, Mok Jiangun closed the slightly open door. Then, he slowly walked over and said, "What is this conversation with the body? Why are you asking when you know?" She spat out the words in a coquettish tone and sat on the bed, slightly crossing her legs. At this, Mok Jae-eun chuckled and approached, saying, "I really don't know. Are you pretending to be naive? Or are you deliberately trying to tire me out? Who knows?" Mok Jae-eun stood right in front of her, 2 steps away. Nung Hwayong raised the corners of her mouth with a smile. What man wouldn't fall for it when a woman with such curves is naked? She thought he would be no exception. Swish. Nung Hwayong naturally stretched one of her legs toward Mok Jae-eun. The tip of her foot was aimed at his crotch. It was to stimulate him. At that moment, Mok Jae-eun grabbed the tip of her foot. Then, kneeling down, he gently stroked her ankle. A glint appeared in Nung Hwayong's eyes. He doesn't seem to be naive. No matter how handsome he was, she thought he might be a naive virgin since he was a boy who wasn't even an adult yet. In that case, it wouldn't be fun. When using her body to eliminate or deal with the target, shouldn't she enjoy it to some extent? It seemed she could put aside that concern. Huh. She deliberately exhaled roughly. There was no way she would get excited just by the act of stroking her ankle, but making such sounds was to stimulate the man. Swish. Mok Jae-eun's hand moved from her ankle, past her shin and knee, all the way up to her thigh. As his hand reached her thigh, her eyes also became sensual. It seemed she could properly enjoy it. It won't be bad for you either. Before becoming a cripple, being able to hold a woman like this could be considered a reward of sorts. Nung Hwayong spoke in a coquettish voice. You undress too. At her words, Mok Jae-eun lightly smiled. Then, instead of continuing to stroke, he crossed his index and middle fingers and walked them up her thigh. At this, Nung Hwayong's face reddened. This guy seemed to have some experience despite being young. Most men had no foreplay and just went straight for it as soon as she undressed. But looking at it, this guy seemed to know women. It would have been less fun if he just pushed in there, especially when she had become dull in that sense. While that was happening, Mok Jae-eun said, "You look delicious." At Mok Jae-eun's words, she let out a moan and said, "Huh. I look delicious? Then hurry up and devour me. You don't have to hold back. Are you excited?" Hearing such words would drive him crazy. While that was happening, Mok Jae-eun crossed his 2 fingers and walked them up, saying, "I need to savor the taste slowly. Beautiful things should be made to heat up slowly to truly enjoy the flavor." Huh. You. I like you. I feel the same. Thinking about the screams that will come out of your heated mouth already makes me tingle. At Mok Jae-eun's words, Nung Hwayong was genuinely heated up. This guy knew how to excite a woman. Crossing his fingers like that while stimulating her imagination with words, it was making her feel good for the first time in a while. Swish. Mok Jae-eun's hand, which had been moving up for a while, reached her smooth stomach. At this, Nung Hwayong smacked her lips as if she was a bit disappointed. Was he trying to heat her up more? This guy was an expert. Not bad. She was curious to see how he would turn out, being called a lunatic. But to think he was a guy who was so delicate and knew how to treat a woman. Mok Jae-eun's hand, which had been gently caressing her abdomen, was now heading toward her voluptuous breasts. Huh. She let out a heavy breath. To her, Mok Jae-eun smiled and said, "It's heating up nicely and softly. I wonder what expression you will make when I peel off the shell of your entire body. I'm already completely naked, what more is there to undress here?" Swish. Right here. Mok Jae-eun pulled her skin. At his words, Nung Hwayong momentarily frowned slightly. What nonsense is he spouting when things were going well? Does this bastard think he can excite her with these words? At this, Nung Hwayong spoke without showing it. "You're good at joking too. Ho ho ho. It's not a joke." What? Nung Hwayong momentarily made an absurd expression. To her, Mok Jae-eun raised the corners of his mouth to the point where they almost touched his ears and said, "From the moment I first saw you, I wanted to peel off your entire skin and see what's inside. Are you saying that to get me excited? Aren't you excited? Are you kidding me? I once peeled off the entire skin of a guy who kept his mouth shut and made him see his own insides, and he screamed so much that he fainted. The sight of blood vessels and real muscles intertwined was really nice to see. Nang Huayang's expression hardened. At first, she thought he was trying to do some excessive verbal foreplay. But that malice-filled smile and his eyes were truly sincere. He wanted to peel off her shell and see inside. Shudder. For a moment, a chill ran down Nang Huayang's spine. She had been killing the guys who crawled into her embrace like a queen spider and always enjoyed the process. Because she got so excited every time she killed the men who were in her arms. Seeing them suffer, it seemed like her numb senses came back to life. This bastard. Is he the same kind as me? She thought, how crazy could he be even if he was insane? But experiencing it firsthand, he seemed even crazier than her. A beauty is seducing him naked, but he wants to peel off her shell and see her suffer. Tremble, tremble, tremble. Crazy bastard. She changed her mind too. She was going to watch him be happy in her arms and then see that happiness break, but now she wanted to see this lunatic beg for his life. Nang Huayang smiled faintly. I need to hear your screams too. Pack. Having made that decision, she wrapped her legs around Mok Jiangun's arm like a snake. Then, she pressed his neck and back with her legs. If he moved wrongly, his elbow would be broken in an instant, so he wouldn't be able to resist. Tighten. It's best if you stay still. If you resist recklessly, your elbow bone will pop out. Crack. Huh? What is this? Mok Jiangun lifted his body with her clinging to him. She, who had reached the pinnacle stage of peak realm and exerted nearly 6-star power with her legs to perform the bone-breaking technique. But somehow, this brat was forcibly enduring her? This bastard. She drew up even more energy, trying to shatter Mok Jiangun's elbow. But Mok Jiangun's arm didn't bend at all. Then, thud. Mok Jiangun suddenly took an unexpected action while holding her. Crunch. For a moment, she doubted her eyes. Mok Jiangun forcibly turned his neck and bit into her thigh muscle on the opposite side of the knee she was tightening. Although she couldn't feel pain, she could still distinguish the teeth sinking in. And the part he had bitten off now was dangerous. If done wrong, she wouldn't be able to walk. Pack. Nang Huayang released the strength in her legs and kicked Mok Jiangun's head. At this, Mok Jiangun's body was pushed back. She also fell to the floor and looked at the back of her knee, spitting out rough sounds. But that part was torn off. Twist. Seeing her left knee not straightening properly, it seemed the muscle was torn off. You son of a... Munch munch. Suddenly, she was at a loss for words. She saw Mok Jiangun chewing on her torn thigh muscle. Mok Jiangun, who had been chewing with blood on his lips, soon swallowed it down his throat. Gulp. Along with that, Mok Jiangun wiped the blood on his lips with his tongue and said, Lick. The taste of blood is okay, but it's a bit tough. This crazy. Nang Huayang was momentarily speechless. She was called a crazy bitch even within the fourth group and acknowledged it herself due to her bad taste that came from being unable to feel pain. But this went beyond that scope. This wasn't the concept of being crazy, but wasn't it being a demon or having a murderous nature? Feeling extreme fear, she unknowingly took a step back. Then, no. Tie her up. It was faster than the end of those words. Swish. Something wrapped around her entire body, restraining her from moving. What is this? Startled, she tried to draw up her energy and shake it off. But then, Mok Jiangun made a shushing gesture with his hand instead of sealing his lips. Then, MMPH. She couldn't open her mouth. Unable to even scream or do anything, her face turned pale. Mok Jiangun approached her and said, You said you can't feel pain? That's great. I have a mirror here too. I was wondering what reaction you would show if you saw your own shell being peeled off one by one. Along with that, the corners of Mok Jaeongun's mouth reached his ears. It was an expression of being thrilled to death. This guy is serious. Seriously. Thump. 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 Her heart was beating fiercely and not listening. Huff 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 huff. After exhaling roughly, she soon foamed at the mouth and her eyes rolled back. Oh? At this, Mok Jaeongun showed a disappointed expression. Chapter 79. Silent Strides. Part 3. When a person is overwhelmed by extreme fear, they say the sphincter and bladder become uncontrollable. Nung Wyong, who had fainted with eyes rolled back and foaming at the mouth, had even pissed herself. Trickle. Seeing this, Mok Jaeongun clicked his tongue. It seems pain tolerance and fear are separate matters. As if disappointed, Mok Jaeongun smacked his lips. Then, Chong Ryong's voice rang in his ear. I think I know your true calling, you fiend. Pardon? You'd make a perfect torturer. Terrorizing people like that, no one could possibly withstand it. No, they'd probably confess everything before you even start torturing them. You think so? You're exceptionally skilled at instilling fear. You really have a knack for this sort of thing. I wasn't just trying to scare her, though. Mok Jaeongun shrugged nonchalantly as he spoke. What? Then was he really intending to peel off all her skin right before my eyes? If so, he has shockingly depraved tastes. Chong Ryong clicked her tongue as if dumbfounded. You're utterly out of your mind. Hearing her reaction, Mok Jaeongun laughed and said, I'm kidding. Just kidding. As if. No, really. No matter how much I enjoy seeing blood, I wouldn't do something so inefficient. Inefficient? Yes. You could call it a waste of time. It takes far too long. Plus, if she dies while I'm skinning her, it takes the fun out of it. I get the feeling he'd do it given the chance. It's suspicious. I wonder if this brat even perceives humans as different from animals, insects, or inanimate objects. This Mok Jaeongun's concept of death is completely different from others. As Chong Ryong was pondering this, Mok Jaeongun spoke. But I did learn one thing. And what's that? It seems even without pain, you can't do anything about fear. Since the woman had boasted about being immune to pain, he had tested whether she would also be fearless. If that were truly possible, it would have been quite interesting. However, contrary to Mok Jaeongun's hopes, Nung Wyong had fainted, unable to overcome her terror. Chong Ryong then remarked. For a living being, emotions are a realm that cannot be fully controlled no matter how much one trains. Perhaps you're right. He couldn't deny it. And not just fear either. The latent anger buried within him since his grandfather's death had not diminished over time but only continued to grow. It was like surging lava. At this rate, he couldn't predict what he might end up doing. Anyway, I wonder why this woman came to my room to do this. What? You mean why she tried to mate with you, you mortal? What a blunt and amusing way to put it. Why are you acting innocent all of a sudden? At Chong Ryong's words, Mok Jaeongun shrugged. She then spoke in a mocking tone. Anyway, whether it was mating or whatever else, if it was a honey trap, it was truly a wasted effort. The Mok Jaeongun she had observed was not someone who would fall for such things. He never takes anything at face value. Even if it's well-intentioned without any ulterior motives, Mok Jaeongun harbors deep suspicions. In a sense, he's quite difficult to deceive. In any case, I'll have to wake her up and ask why she did this. I don't think she would have done something like this for no reason. I agree with that. From the moment the woman approached him knowing his name, she had a purpose. And that purpose was definitely not physical intimacy. Thud. Mok Jaeongun pressed down hard on the center of her chest with his foot. Now, time to wake up. At that, the woman who had fainted soon woke up coughing. Cough, Cough. Upon waking, she blankly stared ahead for a moment, then made eye contact with Mok Jae-eun and immediately looked away in fright. The fear that had taken hold did not dissipate in an instant, as if deeply embedded in her heart. She hastily touched her skin with her hands. Then she felt relieved. Phew. If she had woken up to find her skin peeled off, it would have been truly unbearable. Fortunately, that wasn't the case yet. Looking down at her, Mok Jae-eun smiled and said, "You seem relieved?" Shudder. You need to be awake for me to see your expression when I peel off your skin. This madman. At Mok Jae-eun's words, goosebumps rose all over her body. After becoming unable to feel pain, she thought fear had vanished. But this guy was completely beyond normal bounds. His way of thinking was utterly different. Thump. 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 Her heart began beating wildly again. Mok Jae-eun then spoke again with a snicker. "It would be troublesome if you fainted again." At those words, she involuntarily blurted out something she shouldn't have. Please. Huh? What was she saying right now? Did she really just beg? During the process of becoming a Silent Strides agent, she had undergone so much training. If captured by enemies, no matter what torture she endured, she must never open her mouth, and in the worst case, take her own life. That was the fundamental directive for Silent Strides agents, regardless of rank. Bite. Nung Wyong bit down hard on her lip. It was humiliating. After becoming unable to feel pain, her emotions had withered, and she filled that void with the thrill of others' suffering and death. Amidst that, she thought she feared neither pain nor death. But it seemed that wasn't the case after all. That emotion called fear had been lurking in a corner of her heart. In the end, I'm no different. She, too, was just an ordinary human, nothing special. As she wore a blank expression, she soon looked at Mok Jae-eun and spoke as if she had made up her mind. Just kill me. That might be difficult. The constraint for this checkpoint is no killing. Instead, I can make one promise. Promise? If you answer my questions, I'll skip this enjoyable process and just let you go. A tone as if offering a favor. For a moment, it seemed like a tempting proposal. However, Nung Wyong gave no response. Seeing her attitude, Mok Jae-eun grinned and asked. The question is simple. Did you come here of your own accord? Or did someone send you? Suddenly at a loss for words, I see. She had barely overcome her fear and composed herself, so how could she readily open her mouth? A Silent Strides agent does not divulge information even at the risk of death. With a defiant look in her eyes, she spoke. I'll be waiting in hell. With those words, she opened her mouth and stuck out her tongue. Then she tried to bite down on it. However, clang. Irk. Something solid coiled between her teeth, preventing her from biting her tongue. What? She couldn't see anything. Yet this thing caught between her teeth was incredibly solid. What was it? As she felt perplexed, Mok Jae-eun spoke words she couldn't comprehend. Soha. You said you wanted a body, right? What was he talking about? Could there be someone else here besides them? She sensed no presence at all. Shiver. Just then, a chill ran down her spine. Something cold and eerie seemed to be caressing her hair, and she felt nauseous. At that moment, Nung Wyong doubted her own eyes. Flicker. Before her eyes, a blurry figure appeared upside down. It was a girl with graying hair, but her pupils were white, which was deeply unnerving. As this upside-down girl drew closer, she didn't feel human at all. G-Ghost. MMPH. Nung Wyong tried to twist her body and sit up. But not only was Mok Jae-eun stepping on her, something was restraining her entire body, preventing her from moving at all. Don't come. Don't come. Her fear had reached its peak, bursting blood vessels and turning the whites of her eyes red. Slither. Finally, for the first time in her life, she experienced something possessing her body. It was a sensation on a whole different level from the five senses. Ugh. Irk. Before long, black, bulging veins popped up all over her body as she convulsed violently. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Two men were swiftly walking through the corridor. They were Mok Yucheon and the emissary of the Righteous Alliance's silent strides, Ma Sang. Their hurried destination was none other than Mok Jaeongun's room. Damn it. We better not be late. Ma Sang muttered in an irritated tone. Mok Yucheon gave no response to his words. That was because he had finally confessed to Ma Sang that Mok Jaeongun was his half-brother. He didn't want to talk about it if he could help it. However, he couldn't bear to leave the guy to die helplessly with his energy channels and Danjian destroyed. So he had prostrated himself in apology to Ma Sang and revealed the truth. At first, Ma Sang couldn't contain his anger. That lunatic is the third son of Yun Mok Sword Manor? He even found it absurd. But in the face of Mok Yucheon's continued apologies, he barely suppressed those emotions. Who would have thought that the one who had driven the Silent Strides agents to their deaths would be the scion of a renowned righteous faction? Ma Sang spoke in a hushed voice. Mok Yucheon. Can you keep your word? I'll try my best. Trying your best isn't enough. If the situation weren't like this, I would have classified him as an obstacle to the mission and eliminated him, regardless of your request. This was true. Righteous faction or not, they had suffered too much damage because of Mok Jaeongun. He was extremely dangerous, and for the sake of the future, it was right to remove him. However, there were only 4 Silent Strides agents left. The probability of successfully completing the mission had become far too low. You must persuade Mok Jaeongun. For the sake of ensuring the deaths of those who fell by his hands were not in vain. I understand. Mok Yucheon reaffirmed in a firm voice. The acting emissary of the Silent Strides, Ma Sang, wanted only one thing. Not Mok Jaeongun's heartfelt apology, but for the brothers to become temporary emissaries alongside them and fulfill the mission. Can I persuade him? To be honest, he wasn't just half-hearted but lacked confidence. However, he had to accomplish it. Even if the guy had changed from before, Mok Yucheon didn't think his ability to make rational judgments had diminished. If that were the case, he wouldn't have survived here. Even if he's changed, he's still from a righteous faction. He believed the guy hadn't forgotten those roots. Mok Yucheon thought he should emphasize this point to persuade him. Perhaps this was an opportunity. If they aided the emissaries of the Righteous Alliance's Silent Strides and played a crucial role in the downfall of the Heaven and Earth Society, they might be able to shed the disgrace of being expelled from the Yun Mok Sword Manor. Yes. He'll want that too. As Mok Yucheon sorted out in his mind how to approach the conversation, they arrived in front of Mok Jaeongun's room. However, The 2 men standing at the door looked at each other in bewilderment. No presence could be felt from inside the room. Mok Yucheon asked. Didn't you say one of the agents had already made a move? I did. That's why we're rushing here. They had hurried here with quick steps, not wanting to attract attention by using lightness techniques in the corridor. The perplexed men decided to open the door. As expected, there was no one inside. However, the bed in the room was broken, and it was quite a mess. It was evident at a glance that something had happened here. Seeing this, Mok Yucheon spoke with a darkened expression. Could we be too late? Inspecting the room, Ma Sang replied to that question. We don't know for certain yet. If that woman completed her mission, Mok Jaeongun should be lying on the bed, half-crippled. But neither of them is here. Perhaps she took him to the captain. Captain? Yes. Among the surviving emissaries of the Silent Strides, there was a captain who commanded them. It was he who had ordered them to deal with Mok Jaeongun. Ma Sang spoke in a slightly apologetic tone. We still don't know, so just bear with it for a bit. Let's go see the captain. All right. They closed the door to Mok Jaeongun's room and headed downstairs. The captain of the Silent Strides emissaries who had infiltrated this place was said to be staying in the room at the far right end of the second floor. They were on the 4th floor. As they were heading down, murmur murmur. Boys had gathered in the center of the lower floor, and there was some commotion. Wondering what was going on, Mossang hesitated and couldn't go down, looking disconcerted. What's wrong? Damn it all, what? Warriors with red belts were dragging out a blood-soaked boy. Moreover, not only that, but another boy with one leg severed was also being held by both arms by the red-belted warriors. Looking at them, Mossang was at a loss. Mok Yucheon whispered a question. What the hell is going on? In response, Mossang gritted his teeth and whispered back. They're both our agents. Those two were none other than Silent Stride's agents. Just what was the meaning of this? As they were pondering. Ha 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 ha. Finding the emissaries is all thanks to you. The red-belted warriors who had caught them laughed heartily, patting someone's back and praising them. It was none other than Mok Jyeongun. Mok Yucheon's face instantly stiffened.